You're standing in your front yard, coffee in hand, admiring your perfectly manicured lawn that you've spent months nurturing. Then you see it. Right there in the dead center of your grass, a massive, steaming pile of dog poop. Again. For the 14th day in a row. And when you politely ask your neighbor to clean it up, he looks you dead in the eye and says, "You don't own the earth, bro." Well, what happened next turned into the most satisfying neighborhood justice story you'll ever hear. If you've ever felt powerless against a disrespectful neighbor, if you've ever dreamed of serving the perfect dose of karma to someone who thinks they're untouchable, then you're going to love this story. Hit that like button right now, subscribe for more epic revenge tales, and buckle up because this journey goes from daily humiliation to absolute victory in the most creative way possible. Let me take you back to about 2 years ago. I had just bought my first house, and I mean my first house. After years of cramped apartments and nosy landlords, I finally had my own little slice of the American dream. It was a modest place in what seemed like the perfect neighborhood. Tree-lined streets, friendly faces, the kind of place where kids still ride their bikes and neighbors wave when they see you. For the first few weeks, everything was absolutely magical. I was living that homeowner fantasy, weekend trips to Home Depot, mowing my lawn in cargo shorts, grilling burgers on my new patio. I felt like I had finally made it. But then I met Rick. Rick lived in the house directly behind mine, and let me paint you a picture of this guy. Imagine someone who owns not one, but 2 grills, because apparently one wasn't enough for his culinary empire of burnt hot dogs and overcooked steaks. This is a man who considers a shirt optional attire, even when checking his mail. We're talking about someone who thinks 10 a.m. is the perfect time to crack open a Coors Light and contemplate life from his driveway. But Rick's most defining characteristic? He treated property lines like they were mere suggestions from the universe. And Rick had a companion, a massive golden retriever named Duke. Now, don't get me wrong, Duke was actually a beautiful dog. Friendly, well-fed, the kind of golden that looked like he belonged in a dog food commercial. But Duke had developed what I can only describe as a very specific, very unfortunate habit. Every morning, like clockwork, Duke would make his way onto my property and deposit the most enormous, most perfectly centered pile of poop right in the middle of my lawn. Not near the sidewalk where it might be understandable. Not behind a tree where it might be discreet. Dead center, like he had surveyed my entire yard and thought, yes, this spot right here is where I shall leave my daily offering. At first, I tried to give Rick the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he didn't realize what was happening. Maybe he was just distracted. I mean, we've all been there, right? Sometimes you don't notice every little thing your pet does. So one morning, I walked over to Rick's house. I put on my friendliest smile, practiced my most polite tone, and knocked on his door. When he answered, shirtless, naturally, I said, "Hey there, Rick. I'm your new neighbor from behind you. I just wanted to mention that Duke's been leaving some presents on my lawn, and I was wondering if you could maybe keep him on a leash. Or just scoop it up when it happens." Rick looked at me like I had just asked him to solve quantum physics. He was wearing this tank top that said, "Weekend Warrior," in faded letters, and he crossed his arms and stared at me for what felt like an eternity. Then he said it. The words that would change everything. "It's all nature, bro. You don't own the earth." I stood there, blinking, trying to process what I had just heard. Did this grown man just tell me that his dog's bathroom habits were somehow a philosophical statement about property ownership? "I'm sorry, what?" I managed to say. "Dogs gotta do what dogs gotta do," Rick shrugged. "It's natural, man. You can't fight nature." I felt the slow burn starting in my chest. This wasn't about nature. This was about basic respect, about being a decent neighbor, about taking responsibility for your pet. But Rick had just made it clear that he didn't think any of those things applied to him. "Right," I said slowly. "Well, could you at least try to keep him on your side of the fence?" Rick actually laughed. Not a friendly laugh, but one of those dismissive chuckles that makes your blood pressure spike instantly. "Dude, chill out. It's just poop. It's good for the grass." Good for the grass? Good for the grass? I had spent 3 months nurturing that lawn. I had researched the best fertilizers, the optimal watering schedule, the perfect mowing height. I had dreams of hosting backyard barbecues on that beautiful green carpet. And now Rick was telling me that his dog's daily deposits were some kind of landscaping favor. I walked back to my house that day feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Completely powerless. Here I was, a homeowner, on my own property, and I couldn't even get my neighbor to show basic courtesy. But Rick wasn't done yet. Oh no, this was just the beginning. The next morning, I woke up early and looked out my window, hoping maybe yesterday's conversation had made some kind of impact. Nope. There was Duke, squatting in his usual spot, creating what looked like the world's most offensive lawn sculpture. I decided to try the practical approach. I went to the hardware store and bought materials to patch up the fence between our properties. Maybe if Duke couldn't see my lawn, he wouldn't be drawn to it. Wrong. Duke found every tiny gap, every loose board, every possible way to access his favorite bathroom spot. It was like he had developed a personal vendetta against my grass. Next, I tried a motion-activated sprinkler. You know, one of those devices that's supposed to startle animals and keep them away from your property. I set it up carefully, aimed it perfectly, and waited. The next morning, I watched from my window as Duke approached his usual spot. The sprinkler activated, shot a stream of water right at him, and Duke just stood there, getting soaked, and finished his business anyway. Then he walked away, dripping wet and apparently unbothered. Later that day, I saw Rick in his yard and he actually waved me over with this huge grin on his face. Nice. Try with the sprinkler, neighbor, he called out. But Duke's built differently. He's not afraid of a little water. Built differently. He said his dog was built differently. That's when I realized I was dealing with someone who genuinely didn't care about being a good neighbor. This wasn't ignorance or thoughtlessness. This was deliberate disrespect. I tried a citrus deterrent next. I'd read online that dogs hate the smell of oranges and lemons. I scattered peels all over my lawn, creating what looked like the aftermath of a fruit fight. Duke walked right through them and did his business as usual. Every morning became a ritual of humiliation. I'd wake up, look out my window, and see Duke's latest masterpiece decorating my lawn. And every afternoon, I'd have to go out there with a shovel and clean up after someone else's pet. But the worst part wasn't the daily cleanup. It was the feeling that I had no control over my own space. Every time I looked at my lawn, instead of feeling pride in my homeownership, I felt this gnawing frustration. I started losing sleep. I'd lie in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Duke's morning routine. I'd imagine different scenarios where I could somehow prevent it, but nothing seemed feasible. My friends started asking if I was okay. I'd become that guy who couldn't stop complaining about his neighbor's dog. I was turning into someone I didn't recognize, bitter, obsessed, constantly angry. That's when I reached my breaking point. It was a Saturday morning, about 3 weeks after my first conversation with Rick. I was sitting on my porch, trying to enjoy my coffee in the morning air, when I saw Duke making his way toward my lawn. I watched him circle around, find his perfect spot, and begin his daily ritual. Something inside me snapped. I stood up, walked over to the fence, and called out, "Rick! Rick!" He emerged from his house, beer in hand despite it being 9 a.m., wearing those same ratty shorts he seemed to live in. "What's up, neighbor?" he said, like we were old friends. "Your dog just pooped on my lawn again," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, so? So I'd like you to come clean it up." Rick actually laughed. Not just a chuckle this time, but a full-on belly laugh. "Dude, you need to relax. It's just poop. You're acting like Duke committed a crime or something. It's my lawn, Rick. On MY property. That I pay taxes on. That I maintain. That I live with." "Look, man," Rick said, taking a sip of his beer, "I don't know what kind of fancy neighborhood you think this is, but around here, we don't get our panties in a twist over natural bodily functions. Maybe you should move somewhere more uptight." Uptight. He called me uptight for wanting basic respect for my property. That's when I realized that polite conversation, practical solutions, and reasonable requests were never going to work with Rick. He had made it clear that he didn't respect me, my property, or basic neighborly courtesy. Fine. If Rick wanted to play games, I could play games too. But I wasn't going to play his game. I was going to play mine. That afternoon, I went to Home Depot and bought a large bucket. Not just any bucket, a nice, sturdy one with a tight-fitting lid. I lined it with a heavy-duty trash bag and placed it in my garage. Then I waited. The next morning, when Duke left his daily present, I didn't clean it up immediately. Instead, I carefully scooped it up with a shovel and deposited it in my bucket. I added a little water to help with the consistency. Day after day, I collected Duke's contributions. I wasn't sure what I was planning to do with them yet, but I knew I was building towards something. Rick had said it was all natural, right? Well, I was about to give him a very natural experience. After 2 weeks of collection, I had accumulated what could only be described as a cursed soup of dog waste. The smell was indescribable. It was like someone had weaponized the concept of unpleasant odors. One Saturday morning, I checked to make sure Rick's car was gone. He had mentioned he was going to some kind of car show, which meant I had several hours to work with. I took my bucket of biological warfare and walked over to Rick's property. His yard was his pride and joy. He had this beautiful deck, a fancy fire pit area, and landscaping that he clearly spent a lot of time maintaining. Perfect. I started at the edge of his property line and began painting. Not with a brush, but with a ladle I had bought specifically for this purpose. I created an artistic border around his deck, a decorative pattern around his fire pit, and even spelled out a message near his back door. The message? Nature, bro. I distributed my collection strategically, ensuring that every area Rick spent time in would be fragrant for quite some time. When I finished, I cleaned up my supplies, went back to my house, and waited. Around 4 p.m., I heard Rick's car pull into his driveway. I positioned myself on my porch with a book and a cup of coffee, trying to look casual. About 10 minutes later, I heard his back door open. Then I heard him step outside. Then I heard the most beautiful sound in the world. What the hell is that smell? Rick's voice carried across the entire neighborhood. He was clearly walking around his yard, trying to identify the source of the odor. Jesus Christ, what is that? I looked up from my book, as if I had just noticed the commotion. Everything okay over there, Rick? I called out sweetly. He appeared at the fence, his face red with confusion and disgust. There's something wrong with my yard, he said. It smells like. Smells like what? I asked innocently. Like nature? I suggested helpfully. Rick stared at me for a long moment. I could see the wheels turning in his head, trying to figure out if I was somehow responsible for his aromatic landscaping situation. It smells like nature, bro, I repeated, taking a sip of my coffee. Dogs gotta do what dogs gotta do, right? The look on Rick's face was priceless. It was like watching someone solve a puzzle they really didn't want to solve. But I wasn't done yet. Oh no, this was just the opening act. Our neighborhood had a Facebook group, one of those community pages where people share local news, recommend babysitters, and complain about potholes. I had joined it when I moved in, thinking it would be a nice way to connect with my neighbors. That evening, I made my first post. Lost dog poop alert. Found a steaming hot dog present near my mailbox this morning. If this belongs to you, please collect your property before it fossilizes and becomes a permanent lawn fixture. Thanks, neighbors. I posted it with a photo of Duke's latest creation, taken from an artistic angle that really captured the magnitude of the situation. The responses were immediate and hilarious. OMG, is that even real? That's huge. What kind of dog made that? Whoever's dog needs to clean up after their pet. But the best response came from Mrs. Patterson, who lived 3 houses down. Oh honey, I think I know whose dog that is. We've been dealing with the same problem for months. Suddenly, other neighbors started chiming in. Wait, is this the golden retriever that's been leaving presents in everyone's yards? Yes. I've been finding these in my garden for weeks. I thought it was just me. This has been happening to us too. Within hours, my innocent lost dog poop post had turned into a neighborhood-wide discussion about Duke's bathroom habits. It turns out Rick's "it's all nature" philosophy had been affecting multiple properties, and everyone had been too polite to say anything. The next morning, I took my revenge campaign to the next level. I went to the craft store and bought popsicle sticks, toothpicks, glitter, googly eyes, and small pieces of cardboard. Then I went home and started creating what I called my poop protest art installation. I made tiny signs, dozens of them, each one more passive-aggressive than the last. But here's the thing, I didn't just write regular signs. I wrote them in haiku form, because if you're going to be petty, you might as well be poetic about it. The first sign read, "Dear Duke the Pooper, this is not your golden throne, my grass feels betrayed." The second one, "Morning ritual, your gift unwrapped on my lawn, nature's cruel joke, and my personal favorite, poop happens. They say but not here, not every day find another spot." I decorated each sign with glitter and googly eyes, making them look like tiny, angry lawn gnomes. Then I planted them all over my yard, creating a forest of passive-aggressive poetry. The effect was immediate and spectacular. People started slowing down when they walked by my house, reading the signs and laughing. Some neighbors took photos. A few even knocked on my door to tell me how creative they thought the signs were. But the best part was watching Rick's reaction. I was watering my plants the next evening when I saw him come outside to check his mail. He looked over at my yard and froze. I watched him read sign after sign, his expression growing darker with each haiku. Finally, he stomped over to the fence. "Are you trying to make me look bad?" he demanded. I looked up from my watering can, blinking innocently. "Buddy," I said calmly, "I don't need to try." Rick's face turned red. You can't put up signs about my dog." "Actually, I can," I replied. "It's my property. And according to you, it's all natural, right? I'm just expressing myself naturally." "This is harassment." "No, Rick. Harassment is letting your dog poop on someone else's property every day for months and refusing to clean it up. This is just creative expression." He stood there for a moment, opening and closing his mouth like a fish out of water. Then he turned and stormed back to his house. But I still wasn't finished. The next day, I made another Facebook post. Update on yesterday's lost dog poop situation. The mystery deepens. Found another specimen today, this time near my rose bushes. I'm starting to think we have a serial pooper on our hands. Should I call the police? Animal control? The poop fairy? Any advice is welcome. This post got even more engagement than the first one. People started sharing their own dog poop stories, offering advice, and some even started making jokes about starting a neighborhood poop patrol. But the real breakthrough came when Mr. Johnson, who lived 2 streets over, commented, "I've been dealing with the same problem. Golden retriever, right? Always poops in the exact center of the lawn? I've been wondering if it's the same dog." Then Mrs. Chen added, "Oh my God, yes. And when I asked the owner to clean it up, he told me dogs have to do what dogs have to do." Suddenly, the Facebook group had turned into a support group for Rick's victims. People were sharing photos, comparing stories, and expressing their frustration about the situation. Rick, it turned out, had been letting Duke roam the neighborhood freely for months, and multiple families had been dealing with the same problem. But everyone had been too polite to make a big deal about it. Until now. The social pressure was mounting, and Rick was starting to feel it. I could see him checking his phone more frequently, probably reading all the Facebook comments. He started avoiding eye contact when he saw me outside. But the real turning point came about a week later. I was sitting on my porch, enjoying my morning coffee and admiring my haiku garden, when I heard raised voices coming from Rick's yard. I couldn't make out the words, but I could tell someone was not happy. A few minutes later, I saw a woman I'd never seen before storm out of Rick's house and get into a car. She slammed the door so hard I thought the windows might shatter. Later that day, Mrs. Patterson filled me in. The woman was Rick's girlfriend. And apparently, she had been getting texts and calls from her friends about the neighborhood Facebook posts. She had seen the comments, realized that Rick was the neighborhood pariah, and was not pleased about being associated with him. She told him he was embarrassing her in front of the whole community, Mrs. Patterson whispered conspiratorially. Said if he couldn't act like a responsible adult, maybe he wasn't ready for a relationship. The next morning, something unprecedented happened. I woke up, looked out my window, and saw nothing. No Duke. No fresh poop. No daily lawn decoration. Instead, I saw Rick in his backyard, building what looked like a dog run. He was actually sweating, working hard to construct a proper fenced area for Duke. Over the next few days, I watched the transformation. Rick built a decent-sized enclosure. With proper fencing, shade, and even a little doghouse. Duke seemed happy enough with his new space, and more importantly, he was no longer free to roam the neighborhood. But Rick wasn't done making changes. A week later, I saw something that almost made me spill my coffee. Rick was walking down the street with Duke on a leash. An actual leash. Like a normal, responsible dog owner. He looked embarrassed, like he was hoping no one would notice this radical departure from his usual routine. But I noticed. The whole neighborhood noticed. Mrs. Patterson gave me a thumbs up from her garden. Mr. Johnson nodded approvingly from his driveway. Even the kids riding their bikes seemed to sense that something had shifted in the neighborhood dynamic. The Facebook group celebrated the victory with a collective sigh of relief. People started posting about how nice it was to walk their dogs without having to dodge mysterious landmines. Parents felt comfortable letting their kids play in their yards again. And me? I kept making my haiku signs, but now they were celebratory rather than passive-aggressive. My new favorite read, "Morning coffee time, no surprises on my lawn, victory. Tastes sweet." The ultimate satisfaction came about a month later. I was at the local coffee shop when I overheard a conversation between two women I didn't recognize. "Did you hear about that guy on Maple Street who was letting his dog poop everywhere?" "Oh my God, yes. My friend lives over there," she said. The whole neighborhood basically shamed him into being a decent person. Good. People like that need to learn that actions have consequences. I smiled into my latte. Rick had become a cautionary tale, a neighborhood legend about what happens when you disrespect your community. But the real victory wasn't the public shaming or the social media campaign. It was the simple fact that I could finally enjoy my lawn again. I could have friends over for barbecues without worrying about unpleasant surprises. I could walk barefoot in my own yard without fear. I had taken back control of my space, my peace of mind, and my dignity. Rick had tried to make me feel powerless, but instead, he had awakened something in me that I didn't even know existed, the ability to fight back creatively, strategically, and effectively. Sometimes the most satisfying victories aren't about revenge, they're about standing up for yourself when someone tries to take advantage of your kindness. Rick thought he could walk all over me, literally and figuratively, because I had approached him politely at first. But politeness isn't weakness, and kindness isn't the same as being a pushover. If this story of creative justice gave you the satisfaction you were craving, smash that like button and tell me in the comments, what's the most creative way you've ever dealt with a disrespectful neighbor? And if you want more stories about people who thought they could get away with bad behavior until they met their match, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Trust me, you don't want to miss the next tale of epic karma coming your way.